Gloria runs this town in terms of aesthetically. I see her work just about everywhere. So there's typically stylized figures with some organic shapes and mixed with the organic world. Obviously does murals and street work throughout San Diego, but so much more than that as well. Welcome, Gloria. Can you just tell us where you're broadcasting from and maybe a little bit of what's going on around you right now? And you're on mute, so you'll have to unmute yourself, which is a...
Oh, shit. Okay. Oh, oh my God. We're not supposed to curse, are we? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Gloria Muriel, and I'm here from my studio. I have my house in San Diego, and my studio is my 2-car garage door. Yeah, room, whatever. So yeah, I adapted it, and now I'm just here hanging out with you guys.
It works well as a background. I look forward to talking more.
Yeah, there's so much to look, you know, a lot of ideas. I hang stuff, drawings and little knickknacks. But you're doing introductions right now, right?
Yeah, no. Casual, it's a conversation. So I will say one thing. I mean, typically we know artists work from like galleries or museum shows, or let's just say walls. And the way work is presented, it's rather sterile, right? It's on white walls, it's ideal background. So different from the artist studio where we spend most of the time, where you have things layered on top of each other. And it looks like Teachr is also coming from his studio as well. Teachr is a street artist I've known for a long time. He was originally in one of the first books I ever did, Stay Up Los Angeles Street Art. He primarily paints portraits, I would say, but I know that's not all. You have a unique stencil method. You've been doing this for a long time. You're also the co-host of the Paint the Town podcast with Jim Daichendt. So, and there's a little bit of a, if you can zoom in on that, there you go. Perfect. And certainly we can relate information for how folks can follow you. But welcome, Teachr. Where are you coming from right today?
I'm coming to you from well, hello, Jim. Thanks for having me on, first of all. Thanks again for having that amazing art show. That was one of the best shows I've ever been to. I am coming to you from my studio, which is also my garage. But it's, you know, it's a very comfortable environment, and I look forward to answering questions. And I'm, you know, at any point, if someone wants me to take them around the studio, whatever. But thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have you. And so folks know, I know Adam mentioned this before, but please write questions throughout. This is meant to be casual and a conversation. I'll relay them. Sometimes similar questions or comments, and it's nice to follow up some of the things that are being said. Last but not least, Nick Stern, aka Plastic Jesus, is joining us. And Nick is, I love when you look up Nick and you look up his Wikipedia, because it says he's been labeled Banksy of Los Angeles. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe you can give me your views on that. But I would say that Nick's probably most well known for doing subversive installation of a very high quality. He's a master of media. He, in terms of getting the touch points of where we are in pop culture and just pressing your finger until it hurts. And you see that sort of repeated over and over. Originally a photojournalist, which I'd love to talk a little bit more about today, that has transferred over to the street art world and addresses all kinds of social and political issues, which is perfect for this show. So Nick, welcome, and where are you coming from?
Thanks for the invite. Yeah, I'm actually coming from home. This is actually the spare bedroom. At the moment, my mother-in-law isn't here, so it's about the only time I get to come in here. So anybody who's got a Persian mother-in-law will know how nice it feels. Yeah, thanks for the invite, and great. Thanks for the invitation to be here tonight and in the show as well. As Keith already said, you know, it's so difficult to get that street art feeling in a museum or a sterile gallery. So many try it and don't succeed. There's nothing worse than being a street artist, making subversive art, and then being in a gallery and having somebody, you know, with a cashmere sweater thrown over their shoulders, you know, stroking their chin as they stand back and look at your art. It's certainly not what I set out to do. So it's nice to have street art in that environment that was unapologetically street, and I think it worked incredibly well.
Well, I'm thankful for all three of you being part of it. You are a huge part of the success. For those who didn't get to see the show or would like a reminder, I know we have a few slides, and what I'd like to do is just recap it slightly, and each of you to talk about your work when it comes up. And Adam can launch the slides very quick, and we're not going to be on slides for a long time, but it's worth spending a few minutes doing this. Originally, the show obviously it's about political, social, environmental issues. And when it's called Sidewalk Activism, all the artists involved are using a host of methods to get folks to engage with the work and their ideas and their concepts. So it's more than just, hey, this is who I am as an artist and writing your name over and over, even though that is, I would argue that's a political statement in itself. But there are a host of issues. So each of the sections was divided into different themes. And these are themes that come out of a lot of research in academia. But the first room was a manipulation of media. And as you're looking at this image, you can see Robbie Canal and Shepard Fairey and Dice One. These are folks that are using familiar imagery that you've seen in other places for another purpose. And because when you see an image that you've seen before, you're more likely to engage it. The second room, which we have, is humor. And so folks tend to let their guard down when an artist uses a little bit of humor, and you're more likely to engage perhaps a perspective that you're not familiar with. The last room dealt with beauty and or emotion, knowing when you utilize those traits, you're more likely to get folks to look a bit closer. So if we go to the next slide, we can see Teachr's contribution. Teachr, can you tell us a little bit about the piece you had in the show?
Yes, sir. This is basically coming from the wildfires that were happening in Australia. And this all has to do with what some people are calling the climate crisis. Some people are calling it global warming. And so what I wanted to try to do with this is just depersonify it, and put an animal in there and kind of make people wonder what animals are thinking, and this is just what I would think that a little koala bear would thinking, we don't care what you call it, just please help us and each other through it, and so, when you see something like that coming from an animal, hopefully it puts it in perspective for people, and, maybe the animals being more humane than actual humans. So that was what I went for with this image.
Awesome. And you can see a little bit of that stencil technique with the koala and Keith's intro. So super. And then obviously the back, what kind of sign is that?
I'm sorry?
What kind of sign is it? I know it's the back side of the
sign. Yes. Yeah, that's what I've become. I've actually sold quite a few pieces on street signs. A lot of times whenever road constructions are finished, they don't clean up very well and they leave these street signs behind. And so, I'm out on the streets quite a bit putting pieces up. And so if I see some signs laying around, I try to repurpose them.
You're basically doing us a civic duty here.
I'm trying to do a civic duty as well as a, public service announcement.
There you go. I appreciate that. Well, it's awesome. It looks great in the gallery. And our next slide, I believe, is Gloria's piece. And Gloria has a few pieces, but can you talk a little bit about your work? And Gloria, I know when we first got together and started talking about your work, I sat and I started interpreting and analyzing it, and you got very uncomfortable with, whatever you think, I don't like talking. And I felt like, well, this is what I do. Okay. I did start off.
I still don't know. I don't know how to interpret my work. I feel that every time it's different when I've been asked about it. As you say, I think it's very emotional, most of it. That piece, it's a piece that I traveled to Mexico City, which I was born in Mexico City. And we went to the pyramids, the sun and the moon pyramids, and you can feel a strong energy there.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel my lineage, your ancestral lineage, and I like going there to back and connect with where I come from. And that piece brought it, you know, I came back super inspired, and that's what came out. At the beginning, the frames weren't there, but I think the wood got warped, so we put some reinforcers. And I think it took me about a while to paint it because I left it, and then it might get like layered and complicated, but at the end I just have to let it go. So it's mostly a process, no therapy for me.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And to add a little layer here, this is when we talked about your work originally, I saw it as this connection to nature, and also the human form, and knowing that you have 2 daughters, is that right?
I do. I have 2 daughters.
Female form is featured in there, and they almost blend in an organic way with each other, sort of like there's this harmonious blend of the human form and of nature, or just organic.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I try to do, morph in, because I feel sometimes we're not tuned in, like with nature, just like a teacher with a koala. We just do about our day, and we just go on and on like robots, and we're not tuned in to what is most important. So I feel that's where it comes from.
Great. And as the comments are coming in, Lonnie Curtis asked where everyone was from. She knows that Gloria is based in San Diego, but yes, Teachr and Nick are also they're based in Los Angeles. So that gives you an idea. There's a reference to somewhere north of San Diego. So Nick, we have your example, which is quite different from the previous 2, which is why all 3. What on earth is going here? I know someone snapped a picture of me engaging with this in a very embarrassing way, and the museum reposted it. Thank you. So Nick, tell us about your piece.
Well, the piece was originally inspired by the kind of the 100-year war on drugs that's been going on and been failing all that time. You know, you go around and nobody will kind of openly say, yeah, I take cocaine, I use drugs. But in 2018, $500 billion worth of cocaine consumed in the US. So somebody somewhere is doing a whole load of cocaine. And it's just one of those things that we know is there. We know it's used, we know it's abused, we know it's having a huge impact on society and culture, but it's just not talked about. This piece originally was a street piece that I put out on Melrose Avenue here in Los Angeles. And it actually had 12-foot long lines of cocaine with an 8-foot high $100 bill sticking out of it. And what was great was, you know, I like my work to engage on a number of levels. Firstly, I like people to say, wow, look at this is crazy, and just pose up and take a photograph. But then I want them to engage with it and question it. Well, what does it actually mean? Well, what it actually means is there's so much cocaine in society and it's just out there in the street and nobody's noticing it. In fact, I've got a great photo somewhere that somebody has snapped, and there's this kind of hipster guy in his plaid shirt with his beard and his long hair, and he's on his hands and knees. He's covered in this white powder from the piece, and standing, you know, adjacent to him 10 feet away is an LAPD cop standing there in his pristine black uniform with his arm folded, just thinking, what the hell's going on here? It's quite an amusing shot, but it's really that kind of multi-layer of engagement that I try to aim for. And as you said earlier, that quite often humor is a good way to engage people without shocking them and turning them off. And that's really what this piece tries to do.
Yeah, when we did a tour with the docents early on, I described it as almost like this Disneyland aesthetic that you use. It's well crafted. It's oversized. It almost looks fun without looking at the particular subject matter. You want to take a selfie. There's this irony in all of it that I think is really interesting. I mean, even you have the plastic Jesus logo there on the American excess. I mean, so in many ways, you're kind of you're slapping us around a little bit. It feels like you're playing with us.
Yeah, for me, attention to detail is important. And I'd be quite honest with you, actually making the piece, fabricating a piece of art, to me is as enjoyable, if sometimes more enjoyable, than actually getting it out there and getting some engagement. So I hope that comes through in the piece with the quality of the build, even if it's a street piece. You know, I spent months building a street piece, which has literally been out for a day or even a few hours. But to me, that's irrelevant. If I went through the process of coming up with the concept and then making it, that's fine. You know, it's all part of it.
Yeah. Well, while we're talking to you, one of the questions came in from Gerald. He wanted to know, he was curious where you're originally from, and we can talk about that. But I also mentioned that you were a photojournalist before, because he's asking, did you do street work prior to living in Los Angeles? And maybe you could talk a little bit about that transition. Yeah,
originally I was from London, which probably comes over in the humor and the sarcasm and irony in my work. It's quite interesting, actually, that I get a lot of abuse on social media, mainly from right-wing kind of Trump supporters. But what they don't realize some of the time is that I'm British and we do insults way better than anybody else. And I kind of hope that comes over in my work. So, yeah, I was a photojournalist for over 20 years. And I never set out to be a street artist. It was just something that has always appealed to me. The art, obviously, the name Banksy has come up already in this conversation, but the way in which he can, in a very simple piece, sometimes a single color stencil, he can convey quite a broad but detailed political concept. And I think that's incredible the way he does it. And that's really what I strive to do. Now, people ask me, you know, how I classify my work. And I still say, I'm a photojournalist, but my medium's changed. And I think once you get a grasp of that, you can look at the work and say, yeah, this is commentary on news, culture, society, and so on. So hopefully that comes over in the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of how our work is viewed, Gloria, a question came in from an anonymous attendee. I guess they were worried about singling them out. Speaking, do you consider yourself a street artist, or how do you see your work? It's interesting because, you know, whether it's usually a lot of the one of the characteristics of street art is usually that's illegal, and so yeah, tell us how you see yourself there.
I think I'm considered most of an artist, a muralist. You know, I paint walls, mostly acrylic brush, spray paint. You know, I didn't, you know, when my hometown is in Mexicali, so it's like Mexicali, it's like 2 hours away from here. And I don't feel there was like a graffiti on and popping like it was in the US, you know. And mostly and then the weather is terrible there. I'm used to staying at home because it's so hot in the summer. It gets like 120, you know, 115, 120 degrees. So you get creative, you know? So I couldn't be out on the streets because it was too hot. There was no spray paint either, you know, the spray paint wasn't even down there in Mexico. The curiosity wasn't there till I, you know, grew up, but more as a fine artist. And then I started painting walls. So for me, it was completely opposite.
But you always get permission to paint your walls? I'm curious. Or have you painted walls? Yeah,
mostly they're permission and they're paid for. I have gone on a you know, graffiti move, but then I'm like, I can't sleep. And I'm like, oh my God, I have kids and this and that. And I'm like, oh no, I'm terrible. So prefer to do it legal. Cheers to that, you know. I guess. Yeah. So muralist, street artist, I don't.
And you got the perfect.
Right.
Yeah. Well, on the other side of that, I would say, Teachr, your view on putting work up illegally and that role, I think you've been a master at utilizing the electric switching boxes.
Yes, sir. Technically, those are called traffic signal cabinets.
Traffic signal cabinets. Okay, I would just say billboards for street artists as well.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You have an interesting story, though, that somewhere along the line, you received something from the city to get permission to do that legally. Is that right?
Yes. Originally, when I started doing graffiti, it was because they were making cuts in the education budget and taking art out of schools. And so when I got started, I was hitting billboards and rooftops and the electrical boxes. And after I got busted, I started being more careful. And then it was right around that time they started coming up with permits to put artwork on these traffic signal cabinets. And it was through my friend Steven Ziegler at These Days Gallery in downtown LA. He was working with Tanner Blackman, who was in the planning in downtown LA, and they figured out a application. And so we submitted some artwork, and then this was, my gosh, I think it was 2014. And one day they had myself and 6 other street artists come downtown LA and do artwork on our boxes all at the same time. And we had our permits with us, and each one of us had a moment where the cops came by and we had to, you know, show them our paperwork and everything. Now that paperwork, I basically put it in a nice plastic sleeve and go hit whatever box is open or is in a location that maybe has to do with the piece that I'm doing. And most of the time there's no problem, because the cops know that there are a lot of artists that do have permits to put artwork on these boxes. And there's certain communities that actually have programs where artists have gone and decorated the boxes. But for me, I've tried working with those things, and they get so choosy, and then they ask for a different thing, and then it takes months. And
Yeah.
one not too long ago was, it never happened. So for me, I've never really had a problem with a cop pulling up. And just a matter of fact, the other night I was in Burbank and I was putting a piece up, and it was actually a big boy. He has a morning show on the radio that I listen to sometimes. And this cop pulled up while I was doing the piece, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on there?" And I was like, "Well, you know, do you know who Big Boy is?" He goes, "Yeah, I know who that is." And he's like, "But, you know, do you have a permit or whatever?" I was like, "Yeah." So I pulled out, you know, my old tattered permit and handed it to him. And he took it and he looked at it and he started looking. I've had this experience. Either they look at, you know, briefly and they give it back to me, or if they start looking at all the details, then they're like, "Okay, well, it's not for this box." You know, I'm like, "Well, you know, they've told us to try it in different areas," and then, you know, get a response from them. He goes, "Oh, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just letting you know that, you know, this is Burbank, you know, it's different from downtown.
Right.
And you might want to check with the officials in Burbank, you know, to, you know." I'm like, "Well, are you telling me this is going to get painted over?" No, I'm not saying that. I mean, this guy was the nicest guy. He's one of the nicest cops I've ever come across. You know, he was just letting me know that, hey, you know, this would probably last longer if you get in touch, you know, with the city and make sure you have one specifically for Burbank. Yeah. I was like, man, that's so cool. But so these days I'm not doing billboards anymore because I found out my son has sensory processing disorder. And that's almost like having autism, basically. And so if I was to get arrested again, I would be gone for a while. And this is way more important than what I'm trying to do on the streets, taking care of my son and being here for him. So I'm sorry, I started rambling. What was
No, but that's okay. I don't remember what to know. I was asking you about a little bit about your process, but that's super helpful. You know, and I think it brings up one of the major points about street art that I think I've found is the aesthetics of it are more inviting in general because it features imagery that we're familiar with graffiti. I love graffiti, but it's not always meant for mass consumption. And so even the way authorities or how folks interact, they're more likely to understand it, and you're more likely to engage in a conversation like the policeman that you were involved in. A question just came in asking, where does the name Plastic Jesus come from?
Well, it kind of depends who's asking the question. I came to LA in 2007, and I'm an atheist, but a large population here, particularly Latino population, are quite religious, and they had these little plastic Jesus figures on the dashboard, you know, sitting there in their car. And I thought, I've never seen that before. And then I thought, well, if you're really that religious, do you need a $5 2-inch figure to remind you what Jesus looks like? So when I started out, I needed a pseudonym, you know, so I thought that would be pretty cool. And then I started thinking about it more, and that plastic Jesus figure is actually to remind them, the owner, the driver of the car or whatever, of their ethics, their morals, their beliefs. And in a way, that's really what I try and do with my art. I make us question where we are as a society and as individuals. So I found that it's a name which I almost picked out of the blue, but it's kind of grown to encompass what I do quite well, I think.
That actually, I never heard you explain that, and that's actually pretty lovely, knowing what those symbols mean to folks. That question came from Kent Anderson Butler, so thanks for asking that. So as we're thinking about the pandemic, and as we have stay-at-home orders, and the way we're doing our work has changed so much, Gloria, how has your studio process, what you're doing day to day, changed?
Let's see. When the pandemic started, I was already staying at home because I was prepping for a show at Mesa College, at the art gallery at Mesa College. I was going to show with other 3 women artists that are really cool, ceramics, and I was going to do all the visuals. And I was already staying at home doing a series. After that, the series got canceled. Well, the show got canceled. And then I had a lot of portraits and commissions to do. So I'm actually taking this time to, I was very behind on commissions. So just making use of it, staying at my studio and painting. And I also started, because, you get levels of anxiety, right? I mean, I get a little bit of anxiety and anxious, especially hormones. And so the drawings, my iPad helped a lot just to start drawing and offering just coloring sheets for anyone that wants to color through this times of introspection. That's what I call it. Like, if you can't go out, just go in. No, I bet there's a lot of things that you don't know about yourself that we have neglected. Yeah. So through coloring or through writing, through drawing, I don't know, I feel it helps a lot of people just to go through it. And I had very positive feedback from emails and reposts, and my friends are even doing it because they're always like, blah, yeah. And now they're like, oh, I really like your stuff. And I'm like, oh, great. Yeah, good, well, it works.
Those acts of slowing down, and Adam's going to pull an example up of the coloring book. It's a way of being mindful. I mean, the idea of mindfulness and slowing down and listening. And so just doing something physical that has some peace and quiet that I think all of us as folks who's practice in the arts have probably experienced, but those who don't, I know that's why adult coloring books have become a publishing hit for many.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel we forget. No, and I loved coloring when I was a kid, like to smell the Crayolas, I loved it. And just going back to it means you're going back to, your inner child, going back to happy times. I don't know. I enjoyed those times when I was just coloring. You didn't worry about anything else. So trying to get to those moments through these times I feel they're really important for us not to, freak out or start getting panic attacks, or instead of like watching the wrong news or the wrong information, just color through.
There's a great meme out there that involves how artists and designers are handling, or can they handle quarantine for 2 or 4 weeks, and there are people laughing, knowing that generally are solitary. They're in the studio and they get along just fine by themselves. However, obviously, subject matter changes. And Teachr, I'm curious if you have any works that you're thinking about or that are topical for what's happening right now. Also, I'm going to follow up with a secondary question after that. Someone, our museum director, Maria, asked about the piece over your shoulder, but I know that relates to the podcast, so you can end with that. But if there's any particular project you're looking at now, considering the issue.
Well, I just got through with a few pieces that came up because of the COVID-19. Let me just show you the Familiar with this stencil?
Yep. And we even have an image of that in the street, I think, as well, that Adam can pull up as you're. And that's one of the,
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Is it transparent? Like, can you see through? Yeah.
No, what it is basically this fiberglass window screen, and I put it on my cutting board, the paper, and then cut it,
Wow.
and then spray adhesive, and then put the screen down horizontal, put the glue on, and then put it in the sun, peel it up, voila.
Wow.
that's great. Well, he's
But what I'm also working on is on these little guys, pandemic pups. It's like they're wearing little face masks. And I'll tell you what, I'll show you the kind of the process we got going on here. These are the molds. And right now I'm actually doing an Earth Day dog. There's these guys. And I actually have plenty of resin. I just ran out of measuring cups. So as you know, pretty important when you're doing mixing resins and casting materials and stuff like that to have measuring cups. But in the mail today, measuring cups. So I think one of the slides you had was of the piece that I did for Earth Day, which is basically the French bulldog with the earth thing colors basically that are taking the area of the learn. Yeah, there you go. The learn, teach, peace area.
And if he keeps sliding, you can see the stencils that you did that you just referenced as well.
Oh yeah, there you go. Now you see location, like the piece with the Harry. You notice it's at the Hollywood Royal.
That's great.
And that's because I've hit so many different boxes all over the town. There's certain boxes I know that are in certain locations that work for certain pieces. So.
And I think there's one more. There you go. The toilet paper, which unfortunately you do all too well.
That one took off way more than I expected. I thought it would be I came up with the idea late one night, and I was too tired to cut it. And I got up the next day, and the wife had just gotten back from trying to get some groceries and had a toilet paper issue. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just do this and put it out there. Hopefully some people will get some laughs. Next thing I know, it's gone worldwide. It's made it on the Huffington Post. And it's one of these pieces where it was a very short-lived idea process time. Sometimes the ideas will come up and they'll take like a week or two to figure out all the pieces that I want in on the image, and then I draw it out, and then I cut the stencil, and then then I got to wait for the right night to go out to put it up. And with the homeschooling and the COVID-19, I've been extra careful to wear a full respirator. So when the cop stopped me the other night, I was wearing a full respirator, and I'm sure he appreciated that. And I had to like undo it so he could hear what I was saying. But and it's good to do this at night because no one's around. It's I could do this during the day. Like I said, I have permits, and it's not usually a problem. But doing it at night now is much more appropriate because, especially now, and starting at about 9 o'clock, it just gets really empty out there.
Yeah, and the second part is the piece behind you references the podcast. Do you want to say something about that?
Yes, absolutely. That's another thing that's actually changed. This is the podcast right here. I do it with my friend James Shen right there. We're doing Zoom podcasts now. We were either going to the artist studio or having them come to the office where all the equipment is and everything. And we were working towards a TV show. And you know, we also had a producer, a major producer that does some big TV shows that helped us for one of the episodes that wants to come on and produce it and also produce the TV show. But we got to wait now. You know, we just have to wait. Doing the podcast with the Zoom is nice because like I just showed you around my studio, you know, we're able to do things like that. People appreciate being able to see the artists that we're talking to. But the TV show is going to take a while to happen. And I got to tell you, these Zoom things are nice, but there's a little bit of a disconnect. You know, if there's, you know, like that little back and forth thing where it cuts out or whatever, there's nothing like being face to face with somebody and interviewing them for the podcast, doing that. We get such a better organic conversation. But you know, like I said, that is, you know, kind of compensated with being able to them to show those things. So
yeah, it's part of the awkwardness of technology, right? The pauses and delays and how that works. But we also try to do it as best we can. We've all been in Zoom meetings, probably likely where several people, we did it once or twice here, where several people talk over each other, and then you just have to be patient with that process. But yeah, I hear you. So thanks for that. Nick, I'm curious. There was an article in the LA Times about galleries closing and how many won't make it through this epidemic. And I know that you've worked with a number of galleries in England and here in the United States as well. Curious what you're hearing, what you think, where you think your work will go after this. You've been very forward thinking and putting your own shows together outside the gallery system as well. I'm curious if you thought about that or what you're thinking towards the future and this reality that we're living in.
Well, it's interesting, and the time, you know, I'm relatively new to street art, starting in 2013, and I was represented by a gallery in London initially called Warden Fine Art, and they were doing very well selling my work, and then I found out they're actually selling my work for way more than they were reporting to me, sometimes 3 times as much, and then paying me 50% of what they were telling me. So that was my first introduction to galleries. Now, I was with them exclusively, and which, if you're an artist, a gallery approaches and say, hey, we'd love to take you on as an exclusive, you know, artist. You're flattered. But at the end of the day, you're limiting your exposure to everything through that gallery. And as happened with me, when I pulled the plug on that relationship, because it was totally, you know, just was illegal for want of a better word, you know, I didn't have any sales network, a website where I could sell from or anything set up. And I thought this is a very vulnerable position. Now, I'm represented by a number of galleries now, Kraus in New York, Wallspace and Lurie here in Los Angeles, a couple of other galleries as well. And the relationship I have with those galleries is that those gallery owners, it's not just a business relationship. They are friends. You know, they have become friends with me. And you know, when you think about it, a gallery relationship, the gallery will take 40 or 50%, sometimes even 60% of the revenue from a sale. And that's a pretty unusual business model because firstly, you get your supplier, i.e. the artist, to supply your product free of charge. Generally, the artist will pay to ship that product to you. You have it in your gallery, and then when it sells, perhaps a month, 2, 3 months afterwards, you then send a check to that artist. Now, it's a pretty abusive kind of relationship, really. And in fact, the galleries I work with now, you know, they'll call me up a day a sale happens and say, hey, do you want me to Venmo you or PayPal or send you a check? And the check will be there sometimes immediately, or the PayPal will be there immediately, and the check will be there, you know, in a few days, which is great. It's more supportive for the artist. But I've been fortunate that being a journalist, I've been able to get a large media exposure to my work, be it CNN, BBC, Huffington Post, whatever. So I've built up a social media audience of about 100,000 people. And that gives me the opportunity to reach out to them directly. And I think that is the way that many artists are going. I'll wake up in the morning and there'll be a message, a direct message or an email saying, how much is this piece? Now, you don't know if the person on the end of that message is a penniless student living in a dorm, or a multi-millionaire who has an amazing art collection, including Basquiat's and Van Gogh's and whatever. So it's an interesting kind of thing and an interesting kind of communication that you have to gauge and see, you know, where it goes with. But firstly, it's good for the artist, because as an artist, if you're working solely through an agent or gallery, you're not getting that feedback. And art is all about communication. And if you're just selling a piece and you're getting the check, you don't get to engage with that person that is hanging that piece of art in their home or their office, you know, whatever. And I think that's a huge part you're missing out on. So people that buy my art, I try and build up a relationship with them. And because it is a genuine relationship, you know, we talk about families, we talk about, you know, medical health conditions, and if they're going through a difficult time, you know, I'm there. If I'm going through a difficult time, you know, they're there. I had one of my New York customers, collectors, send me a PayPal payment of $200 today, just because I'm at the moment, I've got a clothing collection, and part of that clothing collection is masks, and I'm promoting and selling masks at what I think is a good price. And her comment was, "I really love what you're doing. I just want to send you some money." So that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we should all mask up now, shouldn't we? So there we are. So you know, I think that relationship is hugely important, and it's not one I would walk away from now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you, and so that's helpful to know, especially with the importance of art fairs that happened, and now knowing that's going to go away, and how these relationships and are likely going to keep artists afloat and keep businesses going.
If I can just interrupt there, Jim, the other important thing is, it used to be the fact that as an artist, you would get discovered by a gallery. The gallery would then promote you to their audience. They'd have a show, etc., etc. Now, because an artist has the opportunity to get exposure through social media themselves now, you can build up a following of thousands of people. So I get galleries that approach me, and I don't want to sound arrogant about it, but they approach me and I look at their social media and I'll see they've got 2,000 followers. Whereas across the platforms, I've got 100,000 followers. So kind of, what are you bringing to this? Mm-hmm. Can you bring me a new audience? What am I getting for your 40, 50, 60%? Or am I bringing my audience to you?
Right.
And whilst I say that as an artist, you have to be able to bring something to the equation, to produce a canvas and go to a gallery and say, "Hey, I've made this, do you want to sell it for me?" I mean, that's absolutely valueless. But as an artist, you can say, "Hey, I've been working on this work for 2, 3, 4 years. I've built up an audience of X number of people. My work was selling for, you know, $200, and now it's selling for $1,000. You know, you're bringing something to the equation.
Yeah.
But I think that's a lot of the reason why I've said that, and I believe it's true, that a lot of galleries are closing, because many of them can't bring much to the equation now. Fortunately, the galleries I work with do, and we have a great relationship. And, you know, if somebody comes to me, says, "Hey, I saw your work in Kraus Gallery in New York, or Herbert Kortmann's gallery in Maastricht, or whatever, how much is this piece?" I will always direct that sale back through that gallery, because they are supporting me. I'm going to support them. Yeah, I mean, that could mean shitloads of money. It could be a $5,000 piece that in the end I will get, you know, $2,500 for. But that relationship, they got an audience that I wouldn't normally reach, and that's very important.
Yeah, and that's an ethical thing to do in that situation, and I understand that. I mean, it speaks to what's maybe a little bit different than street artists, is that you are able to put your work out there and engage a huge number of people, maybe a traditional artist wouldn't, and build a social media following on a scale that other artists might have a harder time doing. And Terry Zindars asked about that in terms of success. Success, you want as many people to engage your work of art. Is that really what success means? And are you making a difference with that? And obviously, with the purpose of the show, we're looking at work that does make a difference. It's talking about important issues, but certainly engaging it. But what we're talking about here is there's also sales, right? There's also survival there for artists as well. So thanks to Terry for asking that. Another question came in from Laura, and she asked if if you've seen any calls for artists to unite, or to put their work together, or calls to help educate people about public health and safety. And I'm trying to relate that to the masks that I know all three of you, two of you have created, and Gloria, that's something you're interested in doing. I've seen a lot of other artists, but what do you think the artist's responsibility is for promoting public health and safety in a time like this? Teachr, you want to start?
I believe that artists, you know, their duty is to give, you know, the representation of what's going on with the current events. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why I did those pieces with Harry with the, you know, wash your hands. And, you know, I'm trying to find a humorous way to remind people to be safe, you know.
To follow up with that, Angela asks, how can we buy a Teachr mask?
Oh, this is a bandana, actually.
And we're going to follow up with Nick too. So
Teachr, Plastic Jesus ones are much better. Available from my website. They come with a free replaceable. Anyway. Yeah.
No, wait, but go ahead, Nick. Where can they get your mask? What would be the website or link that they should go to?
If they go to plasticjesus.com, there's a store on there. And, you know, I started offering masks with my apparel collection back in August 2009. And I bought a small quantity, got them made up with the Plastic Jesus tag on, which actually these haven't got. And I sold about 30 of them to people buying T-shirts and hoodies. And then the whole COVID-19 thing started. And I said to my wife, you know, I've got those masks, you know, maybe I should offer them. And she said to me, why not? I said, well, I don't want to be seen to be exploiting the situation. So I decided what I'd do is I was offering these at $17.50. I dropped the price to $12.50 and you get a free filter. But I felt that I was doing something then rather than just selling a whole load of masks on the back of it. And the mask that I had left, which was about 70, sold out in half an hour. And I've since sold about 2,000 masks. Now, I don't want to kind of blow my own trumpet too much, but I've cut the price down as far as I possibly can. But you know what's given me the best satisfaction about selling 2,000 masks at the moment is in my studio, which is down near USC at the moment. Well, not 8 o'clock at night. I'm not that much of a slave driver, but through the day, I've got 3 people working there. 3 people that would normally be now sitting at home deciding what to watch next on Netflix. I've got a girl who's in movie production. I've got the girl who actually shares my studio called True Love. And I've got a guy called Josh Alvis, who's a terrific drummer, teaches my son drums, but also an amazing artist as well. So they're down my studio and we got this little factory going where we're, you know, stitching these and packing them and shipping them. So, and to me, that's the proudest boast, the fact that not that I've sold 2,000 masks, the fact that there's 4 of us down there working together now, which is great.
That's
I don't think it's taking advantage of it at all. Basically, this is a part of the new reality, and it's going to be that way for a while. And we're just offering, you know, fashion options.
Another way.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Crazy how it's.
Gloria, what's you on this?
Tom,
Do you have? What do you think about offering public service and the responsibility of? An anonymous viewer is asking in terms of what do you think the responsibility is of artists for public health?
I feel that's our responsibility to be of service any way we can through our more honest, you know, way as an artist, our style. Everyone is different and can offer, you know, a different service for everyone. So I feel that a lot of artists are also doing that search, no, of what's happening right now, like reevaluating what they're doing and trying to now be more honest with themselves and more true. That will be more useful right now at these times. So
if I can say, Jim, if I can just come in there, it's a difficult time for artists because we've got to think, here we are, we're in the middle of a global pandemic where people are dying. Every night we're seeing hero health workers, doctors, medics on TV. And we kind of have to think to ourselves, well, what do? Well, we throw a bit of paint on a wall at the end of the day. What value do we actually hold right now? And that's a question I've asked myself. And I've kind of found the answer by looking at so much content now online, and people are engaging so much in creativity, whether it's watching movies, listening to podcasts, even creating memes. It's all creativity. So clearly
Yeah.
we do have a value here.
Yeah.
And whether it's an escape or a reality check, or it's just expressing a voice that most people can't express, but we do that for them. You know, I think that's our value here as artists.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
something, even in a venue like this, just being able to connect with people and even, bringing us together and as well. One last question before we close, because we're coming up on time, but Amy asked, with all public art is always a response to commentary on contemporary events, are any of you exhausted with having to come up with clever responses to the COVID-19, or would you rather be doing something else? Is there something perhaps healthy about looking more inward rather than looking outward at the moment?
I'll
I
start
like
that. Yeah, I'm. You know, like I've shown you the stencils I've done. I'm a bit sick of having to do stuff, and actually I started doing some sculpture. This is a little turtle. And actually, you can see there's actually letters in there. It actually says peace and ohana, which is family in Hawaiian. I'm putting myself in Hawaii basically by doing this little turtle. It also says learn and teach in there as well. But you know, this is kind of my coping mechanism. You know, working with my hands and
yeah.
you know, that's part of it.
Great.
I'm also doing, what is it, a mural at home for a Seawalls Festival, you know, movement that I think 600 and more artists are doing, street artists, all kinds of artists. Just painting at home, documenting. If they people wanna just reach out, and also treating of the subject of the COVID. I don't know. I don't want to. Sometimes I don't want to give it too much attention because it's like, oh, I don't want to start creating some, oh my God, panic or just taking advantage of the whole thing. But just keeping ourselves busy and active and activists, you know, just trying to help people, because we're not doctors, we're not nurses, but I know that we can make some kind of change from home.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, anything that you're processing internally?
Yeah, just generally, if I can wind the clock back probably about a year, you know, I'm known for doing anti-Trump artwork. I built the wall around his star on Hollywood Boulevard, put no Trump parking signs. And I was getting to a point where on most days, I was getting an email or direct message on social media from somebody saying, oh, Trump has done this or Trump has said this. What are you going to do about it? What's your response? And I thought, you know, why do I get this responsibility? I'm just an artist. And Gloria said earlier that, you know, as an artist, you have certain levels of anxiety. Well, during that time, I just had one level of anxiety because I always felt like I'd taken the weight of the world on my shoulders because I had to come up with some response to what Trump has said. So I cut away from doing so much political stuff, and I did some melted guitars and some big boom wall hanging and things like that, and made these champagne fire extinguishers and so on. And for me, that kind of got me back on track. Started me being more creative without thinking that I had some responsibility to be some God-given representative to, you know, to criticize or comment on everything that was going wrong in the world. And also with COVID-19, you know, I've been thinking of what can I do, but it's such a complex, you need to have a piece which is critical perhaps of government reaction. You have to have a piece which is sensitive to those people who've lost family members and loved ones. You know, it can't be a cartoonish slapstick piece. And I saw which was something which was an amazing piece, and really once, like, as artists, we all see a piece and think, damn, I wish I'd thought of that. And this piece was actually, I think, on the cover of New European magazine. It had the Europe flag, the blue flag with the gold, the gold stars on it. And the famous photo from the liberation of Iwo Jima with the soldiers, the troops raising the flag. It had that, but they were healthcare workers in their light blue scrubs raising the flag. And to me, that was a perfect piece. And I thought, I can't compete with that. So to be honest, I've not tried. I did a Clorox piece today, just based on Trump's comments yesterday. But I mean, that was just a bit of amusement rather than a serious art comment, you know?
Right. Well, let me say, I appreciate each one of you. And some of us have known each other a long time, some of us just a short time.
Hi, Brian.
But
Hey, Brian.
I appreciate how much your role in with this show. And I saw Brian Snyder, who's also an artist in the show.
Hey, Brian, yeah. He should be this side of the camera as well.
Yeah.
I know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And before we close out, I know there were several comments throughout the chat asking how folks can follow you, how they can buy things. Anything you want to say about social media or ways that folks can get in touch with you or make sure they're up to date on your latest things? Nick, you want to start off with websites or Instagram handles?
Yeah, everything revolves around plasticjesus.com, Plastic Jesus on Instagram. Instagram is great for art and visual imagery, so they're the main two. And my store and Twitter are all fed off those, so that's keep it simple. If they go to those, they can find everything, including these very good quality.
Yes, those are
durable masks.
I want to get one.
Yeah, I don't have any masks to sell, unfortunately, that have my name. So I'm sorry, I can't offer anything. But Keith, what else? How can folks follow you and get in touch?
Best way is on Instagram. I'm usually doing a post at least every day, every other day or so. It's Teachr1. And my website is teachr1.com. That's going to be redone here within the next 3 or 4 weeks. And I'll have all these new things on there, including the much better than Plastic Jesus.
Did I say these have got Velcro fastening on the back? So you can just...
I love it. The Paint to Town podcast, where can folks find that?
The PTTP show on Instagram, and also LAStreetArtGallery.com has a link to the PTTPshow.com.
Great.
So that's how you find us.
Great, Rob. That was a question by Robin. I wanted to make sure she got that. Gloria, how can folks follow you?
Gloria, I'm also Instagram, Gloria Muriel, at Gloria Muriel, and my website, gloriamuriel.com. That's where you can see all the coloring pages, and you can download for free through this pandemic. And
Awesome.
I have some also store there of originals. So yeah, thank you for having us.